The Belgian Congo was the formal title of present-day Democratic Republic of the Congo between King Leopold II's unregistered trademark's formal relinquishment of his personal control over the state to Belgium on November 15, 1908, and Congolese independence on June 30, 1960. Congo Free State, 1884–1908. Until the later part of the 19th century, few Europeans had ventured into the Congo Basin. The rainforest, swamps and accompanying malaria, and other diseases, such as sleeping sickness, made it a difficult environment for European-style exploration and exploitation. In 1876, King Leopold II of the Belgians organized the International African Association with the cooperation of the leading African explorers and the support of several European governments for the promotion of African exploration and colonization. After Henry Morton Stanley had explored the region in a journey that ended in 1878, Leopold courted the explorer and hired him to help his interests in the region. Leopold II had been keen to acquire a colony for Belgium even before he ascended to the throne in 1865. He believed that the acquisition of a colony would bestow international prestige on his relatively young and small home country and that it might provide a steady source of income. Belgium showed little interest in its monarch's dreams of empire building. Ambitious and stubborn, Leopold decided to pursue the matter on his own account. European rivalry in Central Africa led to diplomatic tensions, in particular with regard to the largely unclaimed Congo River Basin. In November 1884, Otto von Bismarck convened a 14-nation conference to find a peaceful resolution to the Congo crisis. Though the Berlin Conference did not formally approve the territorial claims of the European powers in Central Africa, it did agree on a set of rules to ensure a conflict-free partitioning of the region. The rules recognized the Congo Basin as a free trade zone. In reality, Leopold II emerged triumphant from the Berlin Conference and Leopold's single-shareholder philanthropic organization received a large share of territory, to be constituted as the Congo Free State. The Congo Free State operated as a corporate state privately controlled by Leopold II through a non-governmental organization, the Association Internationale Africaine. The state included the entire area of the present Democratic Republic of the Congo and existed from 1885 to 1908, when the government of Belgium annexed the area. Under Leopold II's unregistered trademark's administration, the Congo Free State became a humanitarian disaster. The lack of accurate records makes it difficult to quantify the number of deaths. Many of the deaths were attributed to lack of immunity to new diseases introduced by contact with European colonists. William Rubinstein wrote, "More basically, it appears almost certain that the population figures given by Hochschild are inaccurate. There is, of course, no way of ascertaining the population of the Congo before the 20th century, and estimates like 20 million are purely guesses. Most of the interior of the Congo was literally unexplored if not inaccessible." The European and American press exposed the conditions in the Congo Free State to the public in the early 1900s. In 1904, Leopold II was forced to allow an international parliamentary commission of inquiry entry to the Congo Free State. By 1908, public pressure and diplomatic maneuvers led to the end of Leopold II's personal rule and to the annexation of the Congo as a colony of Belgium, known as the Belgian Congo. Belgian colony, 1908–1960. On October 18, 1908, the Belgian Parliament voted in favour of annexing the Congo as a Belgian colony. This was only after King Leopold II had given up any hope to maintain a substantial part of the Congo Free State as separate crown property. The government of the Belgian Congo was arranged by the 1908 Colonial Charter. Executive power rested with the Belgian Minister of Colonial Affairs, assisted by a colonial council. Both resided in Brussels. The Belgian Parliament exercised legislative authority over the Belgian Congo. The highest-ranking representative of the Colonial Administration in the Congo was the Governor-General. From 1886 until 1926, the Governor-General and his administration were posted in Boma, near the Congo River estuary. From 1926, the colonial capital moved to La Copyright à Poltville, some 300 km further upstream in the interior. Initially, The Belgian Congo was administratively divided into 4 provinces: La Copyright Poldeville, Equateur, Oriental and Katanga, each presided by a vice-governor-general. An administrative reform in 1932 increased the number of provinces to 6, while a demoting the vice-governors-general to provincial governors. The territorial service was the true backbone of the colonial administration. Each province was divided into 24 districts and each district into 120 territories. A territory was managed by a territorial administrator, assisted by one or more assistants. The territories were further subdivided into numerous oikafdomsa, at the head of which the Belgian administration appointed a traditional chiefs. The territories administered by one territorial administrator and a handful of assistants were often larger than a few Belgian provinces taken together. Nevertheless, the territorial administrator was expected to inspect his territory and to file detailed annual reports with the provincial administration. In terms of jurisdiction, 2 systems coexisted, a system of European courts and one of indigenous courts. These indigenous courts were presided over by the traditional chiefs, but had only limited powers and remained under the firm control of the colonial administration. In 1936 it was recorded that there were 728 administrators controlling the Congo from Belgium. Belgians living in the Congo had no say in the government and the Congolese did not either. No political activity was permitted in the Congo whatsoever. Public order in the colony was maintained by the Force Publique, a locally recruited army under Belgian command. It was only in the 1950s that metropolitan troops that is, units of the regular Belgian army were posted in the Belgian Congo. The colonial state and in fact any authority exercised by whites in the Congo was often referred to by the Congolese as Bulamatari, one of the names originally given to Stanley, because of the dynamite he used to crush rocks when paving his way through the lower Congo region. The term Bulamatari came to signify the irresistible and compelling force of the colonial state. When the Belgian government took over the administration in 1908, the situation in the Congo improved in certain respects. The brutal exploitation and arbitrary use of violence, in which some of the concessionary companies had excelled, were curbed. The crime of red rubber was put to a stop. Article 3 of the new colonial charter of October 18, 1908 established that, nobody can be forced to work on behalf of and for the profit of companies or privates. In reality, forced labor, in differing forms and degrees, would not disappear entirely until the end of the colonial period. The transition from the Congo Free State to the Belgian Congo was a break, but it was also marked by a large degree of continuity. The last Governor-General of the Congo Free State, Baron Woyers, remained in office in the Belgian Congo and the majority of Leopold II's unregistered trademark administration with him. Opening up the Congo and its natural and mineral riches for the Belgian economy remained the main motive for colonial expansion, but all the same other priorities, such as healthcare and basic education, slowly gained in importance. The Belgian Congo was directly involved in the 2 world wars. During World War I, an initial standoff between the Force Publique and the German colonial army in German East Africa turned into open warfare with a joint Anglo-Belgian invasion of German colonial territory in 1916 and 1917 during the East African Campaign. The Force Publique gained a notable victory when it marched into Tabora in September 1916, under the command of General Charles Tombert after heavy fighting. After the war, Belgium was rewarded for the participation of the Force Publique in the East African Campaign with a League of Nations mandate over the former German colony of Rwanda-Urundi. During World War II, the Belgian Congo served as a crucial source of income for the Belgian government in exile in London. The Force Publique again participated in the Allied campaigns in Africa. Belgian Congolese forces notably fought against the Italian colonial army in Ethiopia in Assasa, Bauta and Sao under Major General Auguste-Edouard Gilliatt during the Second East African Campaign of 1940–1941. Colonial economic policy. The economic exploitation of the Congo was the colonizer unregistered trademark's top priority. One important tool was the construction of railways to open up the mineral and agricultural areas. First World War, rubber had long been the main export, but its importance fell from 77% of exports to only 15%. New resources opened, especially copper mining in Katanga province. The Belgian-owned Union Minière du Haut Katanga, which was to dominate copper mining, used a direct rail line to the sea at Beira. The war caused a heavy demand for copper, and production soared from 997 tons in 1911 to 27,462 tons in 1917, then fell off to 19,000 tons in 1920. Smelters operate at Lubumbashi. Before the war the copper was sold to Germany. The British purchased all the wartime output, with the revenues going to the Belgian government in exile. Diamond and gold mining expanded during the war. The British firm of Lever Brothers greatly expanded the palm oil business during the war, and there was an increased output of cocoa, rice and cotton. New rail and steamship lines opened to handle the expanded export traffic. Investments. Under Belgian rule, two distinct periods of massive investment in the Congo Euro unregistered trademark economic infrastructure stand out, the 1920s and the 1950s. After the First World War, priority was given to mining as well as to the transport infrastructure. To obtain the necessary capital, the colonial state gave the private companies, to a large extent, a free hand. This allowed, in particular, the Belgian Socia Copyright Tar Copyright Gar Copyright Na Copyright Rail to build up an economic empire in the colony. Huge profits were generated and for a large part siphoned off to Europe in the form of dividends. The necessary workforce was recruited in the interior of the vast colony with the active support of the Territorial Administration. In many cases, this amounted to forced labor, as in many villages minimum quotas of a able-bodied worker euro to be recruited were enforced. In this way, tens of thousands of workers were transferred from the interior to the sparsely populated copper belt in the south to work in the mines. In agriculture too, the colonial state forced a drastic rationalization of production. The so-called euro or vacant lands euro that is, the land that was not directly used by the local tribes euro fell to the state, which redistributed it to European companies, individual white landowners, or the missions. In this way, an extensive plantation economy developed. Palm oil production in the Congo increased from 2,500 tons in 1914 to 9,000 tons in 1921 and to 30,000 tons in 1957. Cotton production increased from 23,000 tons in 1932 to 127,000 in 1939. After World War II, the system of mandatory cultivation was introduced. Congolese peasants were forced to grow certain cash crops destined for the European market. Territorial administrators and state agronomists had the task to supervise and if necessary sanction those peasants who evaded the hated mandatory cultivation. The mobilization of the African workforce in the capitalist colonial economy played a crucial role in spreading the use of money in the Belgian Congo. The basic idea was that the development of the Congo had to be borne not by the Belgian taxpayers but by the Congolese themselves. The colonial state needed to be able to levy taxes and money on the Congolese, so it was important that they could make money by selling their produce or their labor within the framework of the colonial economy. The economic boom of the 1920s turned the Belgian Congo into one of the leading copper ore producers worldwide. In 1926 alone, the Union Minière re-exported more than 80,000 tons of copper ore, a large part of which was processed in Hoboken in Belgium. In 1928, King Albert I visited the Congo to inaugurate the so-called Voie Nationale that linked the Katanga mining region via rail and river transport to the Atlantic port of Matadi. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, the export-based Belgian Congo economy was severely hit by the world crisis, because of the drop of international demand of raw materials and agricultural products. In some areas, as in the Katanga mining region, employment declined by 70% and in the whole country the exploitation of forced labor was diminished while many forced laborers returned to their villages. After the occupation of Belgium by the Germans in May 1940, the Congo declared itself loyal to the Belgian government in exile in London to continue the war on the Allied side in the Battle of Britain with 28 pilots in the RAF and in the Royal South African Air Force and in Africa. In the East African Campaign, in 1941–42, the Belgian Congolese army was victorious in Assasa, Bouta and Soho. On July 3, the Italian forces surrendered when they were cut off by the Force Publique under Lieutenant Gar Copyright Raoul Auguste Ward Gilliatt. A Congolese unit also served in the Far Eastern Theatre with the British Army in the Burma Campaign. During World War II, industrial production increased drastically. After Malaysia fell to the Japanese, the Belgian Congo became a strategic supplier of rubber to the Allies. The Belgian Congo was one of the major exporters of uranium to the U.S. during World War II, particularly from the Shinkolobwe mine. The colony provided the uranium used by the Manhattan Project, including an atomic bombs dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. After World War II, the colonial state took on a much more active role in the economic and social development of the Belgian Congo. An ambitious 10-year plan was launched in 1949. It put emphasis on house building, energy supply and healthcare infrastructure. The 10-year plan ushered in a decade of strong economic growth, from which, for the first time, the Congolese began to benefit on a substantial scale. In 1953, the Congolese were granted the right to buy and sell private property in their own names. In the 1950s, a Congolese middle class, modest at first, but steadily growing, emerged in the main cities. Civilizing mission. A key argument that was often invoked as a justification for colonialism in Africa was that of the civilizing influence of the European culture. As elsewhere, this self-declared civilizing mission went hand in hand with the goal of economic gain. Conversion to Catholicism, basic Western-style education and improved healthcare were objectives in their own right, but at the same time helped to transform what was regarded as a primitive society into the Western model, in which workers who were disciplined and healthy, and who had learnt to read and write could be more efficiently put to work. The development of education and healthcare in the Belgian Congo was impressive. The educational system was dominated by the Roman Catholic Church and, in some rare cases, Protestant churches, and the curricula reflected Christian and Western values. Even in 1948, 99.6% of educational facilities were run by Christian missions. Indigenous schooling was mainly religious and vocational. Children received basic education such as learning how to read, write and some mathematics. The Belgian Congo was one of the few African colonies in which local languages were taught at primary school. Even so, language policies and colonial domination often went hand in hand, as evidenced by the preference given to lingua euro, a semi-artificial language spread through its common use in the Force Publique euro over more local indigenous languages such as Lamongo and others. In 1940 the schooling rates of children between 6 and 14 years old was 12%, reaching 37% in 1954, one of the highest rates in the whole of Black Africa. Secondary and higher education for the indigenous population were not developed until relatively late in the colonial period. Black children, in small numbers, began to be admitted to European secondary schools from 1950 onward. The first university in the Belgian Congo, the Catholic University of Lavanium, near La Copyright Poldville, opened its doors to black and white students in 1954. In 1956 a state university was founded in Elizabethville. Progress was slow though, until the end of the 1950s no Congolese had risen beyond the rank of non-commissioned officer in the Force Publique, nor to a responsible position in the administration. Healthcare too, was largely supported by the missions, although the colonial state took an increasing interest. Endemic diseases, such as sleeping sickness, were all but eliminated through large-scale and persistent campaigns. In 1925, medical missionary Dr. Arthur Lewis Piper was the first person to use and bring trypanosamide, the Rockefeller Foundation unregistered trademark S-drug to cure sleeping sickness, to the Congo. The healthcare infrastructure expanded steadily throughout the colonial period, with a comparatively high availability of hospital beds relative to the population and with dispensaries set up in the most remote regions. There was an implicit apartheid, as there were curfews for Congolese city dwellers and other such restrictions were commonplace. Though there were no specific laws barring blacks from entering the same establishments whites frequented, there was de facto segregation in most areas. For example, the city centers were reserved to white population only, while the blacks were organized in a Sita copyrightus indigeniza. Hospitals, department stores and other facilities were often reserved for either whites or blacks. In the police, the blacks could not pass the rank of non-commissioned officer. The blacks in the cities could not leave their houses from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. This type of segregation began to disappear gradually only in the 1950s, but even then the Congolese remained or felt treated in many respects as second-rate citizens. The popular comic book Tintin in the Congo, first published in 1931, provides an insight into the view of Africa as primitive that prevailed at the time in Europe. Because of the close interconnection between economic development and the civilizing mission, and because in practice state officials, missionaries and the white executives of the private companies always lent each other a helping hand, the image has emerged that the Belgian Congo in reality was governed by a holy trinity of king church capital. The ideology underpinning colonial policy was summed up in a catchphrase used by Governor-General Pierre Ryckmans, "De minor pour serveur." The colonial government was keen to convey the image of a benevolent and conflict-free administration and of the Belgian Congo as a true model colony. But no or very little attention was paid to the active emancipation of the Congolese. The colonizer alone knew what was good for the Congo. The local population was given no voice in the affairs of the state. It was only in the 1950s that this paternalistic attitude began to change. As from 1953, and even more so after the triumphant visit of King Baudouin to the colony in 1955, Governor-General La Copyright on Par Copyright Tillen actively favored the creation of AAEUROE Belgian Congolese Community Euro, in which blacks and whites were to be treated as equals. In the 1950s, the most blatant discriminatory measures directed at the Congolese were hastily withdrawn. In 1957, the first municipal elections opening to black voters took place in a handful of the largest cities La Copyright Apollotville, Uppermill Elizabethville and Jadotville. Resistance and voices of dissent. Congolese resistance against colonialism was widespread and took many different forms. Armed resistance occurred sporadically and localized until roughly the end of the Second World War. From the end of the Second World War until the late 1950s, the so-called Pax Belgica prevailed. Until the end of colonial rule in 1960, passive forms of resistance and expressions of an anti-colonial subculture were manifold. Apart from active and passive resistance among the Congolese, the colonial regime over time also elicited internal criticism and dissent. Already in the 1920s, certain members of the Colonial Council in Brussels voiced criticism regarding the often brutal recruitment methods employed by the major companies in the mining districts. The stagnation of population growth in many districts in spite of spectacular successes in the fight against endemic diseases such as sleeping sickness was another cause for concern. Low birth rates in the countryside and the depopulation of certain areas were typically attributed to the disruption of traditional community life as a result of forced labor migration and mandatory cultivation. Many missionaries who were in daily contact with Congolese villagers, took their plight at heart and sometimes intervened on their behalf with the Colonial Administration. The missions and certain territorial administrators also played an important role in the study and preservation of Congolese cultural and linguistic traditions and artifacts. One example among many is that of Father Gustave Hulstert, who in 1937 created the periodical Equatoria devoted to the linguistic, ethnographic and historical study of the Mongo people of the central Congo Basin. The colonial state itself took an interest in the cultural and scientific study of the Congo, particularly after the Second World War through the creation of the Institut pour la Recherche Scientifique en Afrique Centrale. Towards independence, 1945–1960. In the early 1950s, political emancipation of the Congolese elites, let alone of the masses, seemed like a far cry. Nonetheless, it was clear that the Congo could not forever remain immune from the rapid changes that, after the Second World War, profoundly affected colonialism around the world. The independence of the British, French and Dutch colonies in Asia shortly after 1945 had little immediate impact in the Congo, but in the United Nations pressure on Belgium was stepped up. Belgium had ratified Article 73 of the United Nations Charter, which advocated self-determination, and both superpowers put pressure on Belgium to reform its Congo policy. However, the Belgian government tried to resist as best it could what it labeled interference with its colonial policy. All the same, it was clear to the colonial authorities that something needed to be done to ameliorate the situation of the Congolese. Since the 1940s, the colonial government had experimented in a very modest way with granting a limited elite of so-called a copyright follower copyrights more civil rights, holding out the eventual prospect of a limited amount of political influence. To this end deserving Congolese could apply for a proof of civil merit, or, one step up, immatriculation, that is, official evidence of their assimilation with European civilization. To acquire this status, the applicant had to fulfill strict conditions and submit to stringent controls. This policy was a failure. By the mid-1950s, there were at best a few thousand Congolese who had successfully obtained the civil merit diploma or been granted immatriculation. The supposed benefits attached to euro including equal legal status with the white population euro proved often more theory than reality and led to open frustration with the copyright follower copyrights. When Governor-General Par Copyright-Tillon began to speak about granting the native people more civil rights, even suffrage, to create what he termed Euro Belgo-Congolese Community Euro, his ideas were met with indifference from Brussels and often with open hostility from some of the Belgians in the Congo, who feared for their privileges. It became increasingly evident that the Belgian government lacked a strategic long-term vision in relation to the Congo. This was due partly to the fact that a Euro-colonial affairs unregistered trademark did not generate much interest or political debate in Belgium, so long as the colony seemed to be thriving and calm. A notable exception was the young King Belgisch, one of the Belgians, who had succeeded his father, Leopold III, under dramatic circumstances in 1951, when Leopold was forced to abdicate. Belgisch took a lively interest in the Congo. On his first state visit to the Belgian Congo in 1955, he was welcomed enthusiastically by cheering crowds of whites and blacks alike, as captured in Andra copyright Corvina Euro unregistered trademark documentary film, Bwana Kitoko. Foreign observers, such as the international correspondent of the Manchester Guardian, remarked that Belgian paternalism seemed to work Euro, and contrasted Belgium Euro unregistered trademark seemingly loyal and enthusiastic colonial subjects with the restless French and British colonies. On the occasion of his visit, King Baudouin openly endorsed the Governor-General Euro unregistered trademark's vision of Euro Belgo-Congolese Community Euro. But, in practice, this idea progressed slowly. At the same time, divisive ideological and linguistic issues in Belgium, which heretofore had been successfully kept out of the Colonial Euro unregistered trademark's affairs, now began to make themselves felt in the Congo as well. These included the rise of unionism among workers, the call for public schools to break the mission's Euro unregistered trademark monopoly on education, and the call for equal treatment in the colony of both national languages, French and Dutch. Until then, French had been promoted as the unique colonial language. The Governor-General feared that such divisive issues would undermine the authority of the colonial government in the eyes of the Congolese, while also diverting attention from the more pressing need for true emancipation. Political organization. As a result of the inability of the colonial government to introduce radical and credible changes, the Congolese elites began to take matters more and more in their own hands by organizing themselves socially and soon also politically. In fact, it can be argued that the seeds of Congo Euro unregistered trademark's post-independence woes were sown in the emergence in the 1950s of two markedly different forms of nationalism among the Congolese elites. The nationalist movement Euro, to which the Belgian authorities, to some degree, turned a blind eye. Promoted territorial nationalism wherein the Belgian Congo would become one politically united state after independence. In opposition to this was the ethno-religious and regional nationalism that took hold in the Bay-Congo territories of the west coast, Kasai and Katanga. The first political organizations were of the latter type. ABAKO, founded in 1950 as the Association Culturelle des Bay-Congo and headed by Joseph Kasavubu, was initially a cultural association that soon turned political and, from the mid-1950s, became a vocal opponent of Belgian colonial rule. Additionally, the organization continued to serve as the major ethno-religious organization for the Bay-Congo and became closely intertwined with the Kimbanquist Church, which was extremely popular in the Lower Congo. In 1955, Belgian professor Antoine van Bilsen published a treatise called 30-Year Plan for the Political Emancipation of Belgian Africa. The timetable called for the gradual emancipation of the Congo over a 30-year period. The time van Bilsen expected it would take to create an educated elite who could replace the Belgians in positions of power. The Belgian government and many of the copyright copyrighters were suspicious of the plan. The former because it meant eventually giving up the Congo, and the latter because Belgium would still be ruling Congo for another 3 decades. A group of Catholic copyrighters responded positively to the plan with a moderate manifesto in a Congolese journal called Conscience Africaine, with their only point of disagreement being the amount of Congolese participation. In 1957, by way of experiment, the colonial government organized in 3 urban centers the first municipal elections in which Congolese people were allowed to stand for office and cast their vote. Events in 1957 Euro 58 led to a sudden acceleration in the demands for political emancipation. This was, in part, influenced by developments outside the Congo, notably the independence of Ghana in 1957 and President de Gaulle's Euro unregistered trademark August 1958 visit to Brazzaville, the capital of the French Congo, on the other side of the Congo River, opposite La Copyright Leopoldville, in which he promised France a Euro unregistered trademark African colonies the free choice between a continued association with France or full independence. The World Exhibition organized in Brussels in 1958 proved another eye-opener for many Congolese leaders, who were allowed to travel to Belgium for the first time. In 1958, the demands for independence radicalized quickly and gained momentum. A key role was played by the Mouvement National Congolais. First set up in 1956, the MNC established itself in October 1958 as a national political party that supported the idea of a unitary and centralized Congolese nation after independence. Its most influential leader was the charismatic Patrice Lumumba. In 1959, an internal split was precipitated by Albert Kalonji and other MNC leaders who favored a more moderate political stance. Despite the organizational divergence of the party, Lumumba Euro unregistered trademark leftist faction and the MNC collectively had established themselves as by far the most important and influential party in the Belgian Congo. Belgium vehemently opposed Lumumba Euro unregistered trademark leftist views and had grave concerns about the status of their financial interests should Lumumba Euro unregistered trademark MNC gain power. A Euro Le Panda Euro in the winter of 1958 Euro 59, while the Belgian government was debating a program to gradually extend the political emancipation of the Congolese population, it was overtaken by events. On January 4, 1959, a prohibited political demonstration organized in La Copyright Leopoldville by ABAKO got out of hand. At once, the colonial capital was in the grip of heavy rioting. It took the authorities several days to restore order and, by the most conservative count, several hundred died. The eruption of violence sent a shock wave through the Congo and Belgium alike. On January 13, King Leopold II solemnly declared in a radio address that Belgium would work towards the full independence of the Congo without hesitation, but also without irresponsible rashness. Without committing to a specific date for independence, the government of Prime Minister Gaston Euskens had a multi-year transition period in mind during which provincial elections would take place in December 1959, national elections in 1960 or 1961, after which administrative and political responsibilities would be gradually transferred to the Congolese, in a process presumably to be completed towards the mid-1960s. On the ground the reality looked quite different. Increasingly, the colonial administration saw itself confronted with non-cooperation. In some regions anarchy threatened. At the same time it was clear that an important portion of the Belgian population in the Congo opposed the idea of independence and felt betrayed by Brussels. In those circumstances, and faced with the radicalization of Congolese demands, the chances of a gradual and carefully planned transition towards independence dwindled rapidly. In 1959, King Baudin made another visit to the Belgian Congo. The contrast with his 1955 visit could not have been greater. Upon his arrival in La Copyright-Leopoldville, he was pelted with rocks by blacks who were angry with the imprisonment of Lumumba, convicted because of incitement against the colonial government. Though Baudin's reception in other cities was considerably better, the shouts of Vive le Roi were often followed by copyright pendants in my copyright diet. The Belgian government wanted to avoid at all cost being drawn into a futile and potentially very bloody colonial war, as had happened to France in Vietnam and Algeria or to the Netherlands in Indonesia. For that reason, it was all the more inclined to give in to the demands for immediate independence voiced ever more vocally by the Congolese leaders. It was hoped that somehow, and in spite of the lack of preparations, miraculously, things might work out. This became known as Le Pari Congolais, the Congolese bet. In January 1960, Congolese political leaders were invited to Brussels to participate in a round-table conference to discuss independence. Patrice Lumumba was discharged from prison for the occasion. The conference agreed surprisingly quickly to grant the Congolese practically all of their demands, a general election to be held in May 1960 and full independence d'Ipende on June 30, 1960. This was in no small measure thanks to the strong united front put up by the Congolese delegation. The political maneuvering ahead of the elections resulted in the emergence of three political alliances, a coalition of the federalistic nationalists consisting of 6 separatist parties or organizations, 2 of which were ABAKO and the MNCA Kalonji, the centralist MNCA Lumumba, and finally that of the strongman of Katanga, Mose Tshome, conscious of the economic vitality of its area and the business interests of the Union Miniere. The parliamentary elections resulted in a divided political landscape, with both the regionalist factions chief among them ABAKO and the nationalist parties such as the MNC, doing well. As time until Independence Day was running out, a compromise arrangement was forced through, with Kasavubu becoming the first president of the Republic of the Congo and Lumumba its first head of government. As planned, scarcely 5 months earlier, the handover ceremony took place on June 30, 1960. The location was the new residence of the Governor-General of the Belgian Congo in La Copyright-Leopoldville. The ceremony was overshadowed by a significant incident. In his speech, King Baudouin praised his forefather Leopold II, founder of the Congo Free State, and the blessings of Belgian colonial rule. Prime Minister Lumumba retorted with a vehement indictment of colonial oppression. Scarcely 1 week after the handover of sovereignty, a rebellion broke out within the Force Publique against its officers, who were still predominantly Belgian. This was the signal for disturbances all over the Congo, mainly instigated by dissatisfied soldiers and radicalized youngsters. In many areas, violence specifically targeted European victims. Within weeks, the largest part of the more than 80,000 Belgians who were still working and living in the Congo were evacuated in all haste and often under traumatic circumstances by the Belgian military and later by the United Nations Intervention Force. Belgian Congo after 1960. The rebellion that had started in Thisville in the Bas-Congo in July 1960 quickly spread to the rest of the Congo. In September 1960, President Kasavubu declared Prime Minister Lumumba deposed from his functions and vice versa. The stalemate was ended with the arrest of Lumumba. In January 1961, he was flown to the rich mining province of Katanga, which by that time had declared a secession from La Copyright-Leopoldville under the leadership of Mose Tshome. Patrice Lumumba was handed over to Katangan authorities by the state and executed. In 2002, Belgium officially apologized for its role in the elimination of Lumumba. The CIA too has been suspected of complicity. A series of rebellions and separatist movements seemed to shatter the dream of a unitary Congolese state at its birth. Although independent, Belgian paratroopers intervened in the Congo on various occasions to protect and evacuate fellow citizens. The United Nations maintained a large peacekeeping operation in the Congo from late 1960 onward. The situation stabilized only in 1964-65, with the reintegration of the Katanga province and the end of the so-called Simba rebellion in Stanleyville. Shortly after that, Army Colonel Joseph Dar copyright Mobutu ended the political impasse by seizing power himself. Mobutu enjoyed the support of the West, and in particular of the United States, because of his strong anti-communist stance. Initially his rule favored consolidation and economic development. In order to distance himself from the previous colonial regime, he launched a campaign of Congolese authenticity. As a result, the colonial place names were abandoned in 1966, La Copyright Apolga became Kinshasa, Elizabethville Lubumbashi, Stanleyville Kisangani. During this period, the Congo maintained close economic and political ties with Belgium, although these were occasionally overshadowed by the financial issues that had remained unresolved after independence, for instance the transfer of shares in the big mining companies that had been held directly by the colonial state. In 1970, on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of independence, King Baudin paid an official state visit to the Congo. Mobutu, a unregistered trademark SRA copyright Jime radicalized during the 1970s. The movement Populaire de la Copyright Revolution, of which Mobutu was the pra-copyright silent fondateur, firmly established one-party rule. Political repression increased considerably. Mobutu now renamed the Congo into the Republic of Zaire. The so-called Zairization of the country in the mid-1970s led to an exodus of foreign workers and economic disaster. In the 1980s, the Mobutu regime became a byword for mismanagement and corruption. Relations with the former colonial power Belgium went through a series of ups and downs, reflecting a steady decline in the underlying economic, financial and political interests. After the end of the Cold War, Mobutu lost support in the West. As a result, in 1990, he decided to end the one-party system and dramatically announced a return to democracy, but subsequently dragged his feet and played out his opponents against one another to gain time. A bloody intervention of the Zairean army against students on the Lubumbashi University campus in May 1990 precipitated a break in diplomatic relations between Belgium and Zaire. Pointedly, Mobutu was not invited to attend the funeral of King Baudin in 1993, which he considered a grave personal affront. Finally, in 1997 Mobutu was chased from power by a rebel force headed by Laurent Dar copyright Kabila, who declared himself president and renamed Zaire into the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Assassinated in 2001, Laurent Dar copyright Kabila was succeeded by his son Joseph Kabila, who in 2006 was confirmed as president through the first nationwide free elections in the Congo since 1960. On June 30, July 2, 2010, King Albert II of the Belgians and Yves Leetom, the Belgian Prime Minister, visited Kinshasa to attend the festivities marking the 50th anniversary of Congolese independence from Belgium. Certain practices and traditions from the colonial period have survived into the independent Congolese state, such as a strong centralizing and bureaucratic tendency, or the organizational structure of the education system and the judiciary. The influence of the Congo on Belgium has manifested itself mainly in economic terms, through the activities of the Union Minière, the development of a non-ferrous metal industry, and the development of the Port of Antwerp and diamond industry. To this day, Brussels Airlines has maintained a strong presence in the DRC. It is estimated that there currently remain more than 4,000 Belgians resident in the DRC, while the Congolese community in Belgium is at least 16,000 strong. The Matonga Copyright Quarter in Brussels is the traditional focal point of the Congolese community in Belgium. Governors-General Baron Thar copyright Far Warriors, Far copyright Lix Alexander Fuchs, Eugenie Joseph Marie Henry, Maurice Eugenie Auguste Lippens, Martin Joseph Marie Rena copyright Rutten, Auguste Constant Tilkens, Pierre-Marie Joseph Rickmans, Eugenie Jacques Pierre-Louis Jungers, La copyright on Antoine-Marie Parr copyright Tillen, Henri Arthur Adolphe Marie Christopher Cornelis, see also. Belgian Congo in World War II, list of colonial governors of the Congo Free State and Belgian Congo, University of Louvain, French Congo, citations. References. Bibliography, Van Thiemsch, Guy. Belgium and the Congo, 1885–1980. New York, Cambridge University Press. ISBN A978-0-521-19421-1, Ndewula Nziem, Isidore. Histoire copyright na copyright Réel du Congo. Paris and Brussels, de Burke and Larcier, Stingers, Jean. Congo, Myths et Ra copyright Alita copyright S. Brussels, Editions Roshanza, Van Reybrouck, David. Congo, Ingeniedines. Amsterdam, De Bezige, external links, Belgian Congo article in Encyclopædia Britannica 1922 extension. Oasis Kodila Tedekar and Franklin Kayima Mutba. Sources of Growth in Democratic Republic of the Congo before independence. A co-integration analyses. Review Congolese da Euro unregistered trademark a copyright economy/Congo Economic Review. Document de travail/working paper. WPO2/10 Euro July 2006.